This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Avav. All the learning should be an incredible zchus. Refuah Shalema for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva B'Seir Sha'ar Chayli Yisrael B'Siyata D'Shemaya. The incredible Kayach HaTaira should continue to shower Shefa and Bracha and a Refuah Shalema Gemura on Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva. So we're holding on. Hey Amid Beis. We are about 15 lines in the bottom. The first word on the line is V'Chililoi. Continues the Gemara. Pshita lepalga. The following is Pashit lepalga, that if someone is giving palga, a partial, literally half usually, but here it means partial authorization. Haka'amar dimahani. The Gemara already says that it's going to work. That we spoke about, that Rebbe allowed Rav, says Rashi, to dan dine mamnis, but not to examine a bachar. So what do we see? We see that lepalga, Rav had the authority, Rav had the power to dan palga, partial cases, but not everything. Al tanai mai. But ask the Gemara, can one give someone smicha? Can one give someone authorization? Al tanai, that for the next 2 years, Lamashal, for example, says Rashi. Rashi is in the second medium-sized line. He says, "Kigoyin ad shanoy ad shnatayim," for 1 or 2 years is such allowed. So Tashema answers the Gemara, Damli Rav Yechanan, the Rav Shemen, Arei Ata Birshu say no. He told Rav Shemen, "You are in our rishos achetavai etzleinu." You have our rishos, not in our rishos, excuse me. You have our rishos, you have the authorization to don cases until you return to us. So what do we see? We see that Al Tanai does indeed work. Doesn't have to be forever. Al Tanai would indeed work. Continues the Gemara Gufa. Continues the Gemara Amar Shmuel B'Shadanu Dinei Amdein Ela Shenikra Bezdin Chatzaf. We've seen this prior, which is of course what Gufa means. It says Shmuel, 2 people that judge a case, in as much as 2 people should not be judging a case. Why? Because of course we need 3 people to judge a case. But it says the Gemara B'Shadanu Dinei Amdein, but it's called a Bezdin Chatzaf. It's called the Bezdin with Chutzpah. So Yosef Rav Nachman v'Kamer Laha Shemaitza. Rav Nachman was sitting, saying over the Shemaitza, this halacha of Shmuel. Eisvei Rava l'Rav Nachman. So Rava asks Rav Nachman as follows: Afilu shnayim mizakin or shnayim mechayvin. Even if 2 say he is potter, 2 say he is chayiv. And 1 says, I just do not know. There are 3 dayanim over here. 2 side, 1 is unclear. What's the halacha? Yosifu adayanim. They add on judges. Why would they add on judges? Even though once you have 2, l'chayr, you have a roif. But explains Rashi that it's when you have 2 and 1 says Eini Yedea. It's not 2 versus 1. It's not a classical machlekes. But rather 1 is saying Eini Yedea. In such a scenario, says the Gemara, Yesifu Dayanim, they add on Dayanim in order to paskin the story. V'isa, but says the Gemara of that which Shmuel said, that what? It should be like 2 people judge a case, and it should be Nikra Bezdin Chatzef. And then it should be a good psak halacha. It's true, it's called Bezdin Chatzef, but clearly it's a correct psak. So why over here do they have to add on Dayanim? Answers the Gemara, Shiny Asam, you know what? The case is different. Is the Meikara Ataita the Tlasa Yasifi. When you have 3 and 2 paskin and the 3rd is unsure, they started the din Torah. Al das to have 3 dayanim. Therefore, that's the chiddush that if 1 says any idea, we have to fill in that gap and we have to bring in another dayan. Whereas hacha lav adaita the tlasa yasivi. In the case of Shmuel, that was not the case. It was 2 people. Shnayim shadanu dineim din. Then it works. Benikra bezdin chatzif. Eisvei asked the Marna the Kasha and Shmuel Rashba Goimer 4 lines of the bottom adin Bishlaisha Upshara Bishnayim. When we're being machmir, we give a din is 3. Upshnara, if we're giving a compromise between the two sides, then 2. V'yafek koyach pshara mikoyach hadin. Says the Gemara, pshara is greater than din. Why? Sheshnayim shadanu bal dinim yecholin lachzor behem. Says the Braisa of 2 are machmir. Shnayim shadanu bal dinim yecholin lachzor behem. The bal dinim can retract. Whereas Ushnayim sha'asib pshara, of 2 made up pshara between the sides, ein baladin yichayil lachzor bahem. They cannot retract. So in one way, it's more chamer than the next. What do we see? We see that Shnayim shadanu dineim is not din. Because we see that what the bezdin is cholil nachzor. It's not going to be binding when we have a bezdin of 2. Akasha on Shmuel. We turn over to Vavam and Aleph. And says the Gemara, Trey, says the Gemara, no, not Trey. Says the Gemara, maybe this is a machlokes. Maybe the Rabbanan arguing with Shimon Gamliel and the whole that you could paskin to be machmer even with 2. The problem is, it's not a good din. So what does Ravua say? Ravua says no one argues on Rashbag. So it says the Gemara, we clearly have a kasha on Shmuel. Shmuel's teaching us Shnayim Shadanu Dineim is din. But we see the different Ekol Ein Dineim din. Answers Rav Nachman, Gavra Karamis, what's your kasha? Rav Avua versus Shmuel. It's true. It's a machlokes. Do the Chachamim argue on Rav Shimon Gamliel, as the Tab Rashi spells out? Rav Avua de Shmuel. Shmuel's never believe Rabban Alei. Dirashbag, and he's an Oleg Dirabanan. And Rav Avua holds that the Rabbanan don't argue. But that's going to be straight up the machlokes. Continues the Gemara. Kufa. 4 lines down, Amravu, Shnayim Shadanu Dinei Mamanis. 2 that judge Dinei Manis, the very calling Dinei Din. Eisvei Rav Abba, the Rav Avu, Es Rav Abba, Don Es Adin, Vizika Es Achayiv. If one paskin the case and he made the one chayiv, zakai not obligated. V'chayiv is a zakai. Tim es atar, tir es atame. Clearly confusing everything. Masha also assume mishalmi beisai. Damage has been done and he has to pay. So what do we see? We see that even when we have one dayon done as adin, the halacha is that it stands. Clearly not like Rav Avua. Responds the Gemara, the case over here is they accepted that one judge as the dayan, and that's the reason why it works. But in a chanami, it's true in a regular case, such would not be the case. Ask the Gemara, if they accept it upon themselves, why does he have to pay? Answers the Gemara, we accept it upon ourselves to judge us a din Torah, but not to make a grave error. Says the Gemara, okay, so now let's just go a little bit deeper on what exactly, or when precisely I should say, is there this chiyuv when a daya messes up, he has to pay. Explains the Gemara, we're at 13 lines down, the first line is Torah, Amar le Rav Safar le Rav Abba, in what way did this judge make a mistake that we're now obligating him to pay? If you're going to tell me the Mishnah, if he messed up, straight up, he forgot, he made a mistake in a Mishnah, but the halacha is you're able to retract in such a grave error, and therefore, you're not chayiv. You're only going to be chayiv if you can't be chayzer. Once you can be chayzer, then you can't be chayiv. You know what the case is? He made a mistake with shikal hadas. He weighed the two sides incorrectly. And that's when he's going to have to be chayiv. So says the Gemara, let's delve a little bit deeper. Hechi dami shikal hadas. What is such a case? Amar Abba, kontrei tanai, utrei amarai depliya adadi. We have a machlokes between 2 tanaim or 2 amarayim. And there's nothing concrete, there's nothing clear, the halacha in accordance to one or the other. and the consensus is to follow one of them, and this one dayan, meaning it's a knowledge. It's not that he forgot something. It's not that he made a grave error. It's that the consensus, the normal, is to go one mahalach in the limud, and he did not go that way. Such is the case, it says the Gemara, in which the dayan, the sole dayan, that they accepted upon him as a dayan, but he's going to have to be obligated to pay for his error. Says the Gemara, about 13 lines from the bottom. The first one line is Shikul Adas, Lema Kitanoi. Let's go back. We've been discussing what is the story, how many dayanim do we need to don a case. Says the Gemara, shall we suggest that the machlekes in Shmuel Rav Hua is as well, or prior, I should say, machlekes Tanoim, Bitsua Bishleisha. A compromise, says the Brises, with 3 Divri Rabbi Meir. So says the Gemara, Savrua, they said this machlekes Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim is that they thought as follows: everyone equates Abshara to din. Everyone says that a compromise is the same requirements, the same number as dayanim, as a regular din Torah. So what is the machlekes in Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim? My love, hakam ifligi. Demar savar din bishleisha, umar savar din bishnayim. Rameir holds that what? You need 3 always, whereas the Chacham holds you could have 2. That's the machlekes. So we clearly could potentially have a machlekes Tanoim, Rameir the Chachamim. What is the status of a din Torah, whether it can be done with 3 or with 2? Answers the Gemara, la, and of course we never want to have our contemporary machlekes Amoraim to have been of Shmuel and Rav Avua to have been a prior machlekes Tanoim. So suggests the Gemara, like the Kuli Amadin Bishleish, really everyone's going to agree that you always need 3. What is the case over here? The Marsav Makshinim Bshar Ladin, Marsavar Loi Makshinan Bshar Ladin. The machlekes between Rameir and the Chachamim is, do we equate Bshara to din or not? Says the Gemara, okay, let's have another suggestion. Lema Talasa Tanoi Bimshara. Should we say that there are 3 different Tanoim, 3 different Pshitais when it comes to a Bshara? Demar Savar Amir is an old Bishleish. Umar Savar Ashbag is an old Bishnayim. Umar Savar Biyachid, and the Chamol Biyachid, so it comes out, it's not so gishmak to have 3 different opinions. Answers the Gemara, no, that's not pshat. Amar Ravacha, Breid Ravika, 4 lines from the white lines. Yidim Ravim Bar Shalmaya, Manda Amar Treafilu Chanami. The one that said you need 2 really suffices with 1. Valtikamar Trey is Kechadelavi Alei Sadi. So that there should be edim to the details of the compromise. Ba'etzem, 1 is enough. So it's not such a vast machlekes. Do you need 3? Do you need 2? Or do you need 1? Really, the 2 and 1 is the same shita. The one that says 2 really holds that 1 is going to be enough. Why does he require 2? So you'll have edim knowing what the b'shara, what the compromise was. Says the Gemara, okay, we try to suggest machlekes Tanaim, it didn't work. We try to say it's a 3-way machlekes, that didn't work. Amar Ravashi Shema Mina. Let's learn from Rameir on the last narrow line. Shara ein nisrichin kinyan. Says the Gemara from the sheet of Rameir that we're in the middle of discussing. We should learn that a Shara compromise does not need a kinyan. Why? This Agadaita, because if you're going to tell me that what in the first white line, Srichin kinyan, Lamandamar Sricha, Tosa Lamali, what Rameir hold you need 3. Tiski betray. 2 should be enough. But likni minei. And then they should make a kinyan. So why would you require 3? But concludes the Gemara that the Hilchasa, Pshara Sricha kinyan Lamais, even though we have a suggestion that maybe a Pshara does not need a kinyan, says the Gemara, no. Lamaisa or paskening that Pshara indeed needs a kinyan. And on the last line of Avam Beis continues the Gemara with another din about Pshara. Tanu Rabban Kishem Shadin Bishleisha, says the Gemara, just as the din Torah is 3 dayanim, Kach Bitzua Bishleisha, so to a compromise is with 3 dayanim, and we turn over to Vavam Beis. Nigmar hadin. Once the din is reached, once we have a verdict, says the Gemara of Oven obeys the top line. Then you can no longer have a compromise. As the top Rashi says, what's Nigmar hadin? At that point, the pshara is out the window. That's only before there's a din Torah. Once there's a din Torah, that is binding. Says the Gemara on the first line of Vav Beis, Saramash Bankash Simin. Another call. We've been trying to keep the Zichru Simanim up to date. Many have remarked how incredible they are. We're still at the beginning of the Masechta. Everyone can still dive in. We've done Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, 4 different Simanim. A Bayis, a Gamal, a Delis, a Haystack. We'll see Vav will be up later tonight. But we see that Simanim are as old as the Gemara. So b'siyata d'shmaya, let's try to remember our Torah. But with that, let's continue on the second line of Avim Beis. As we're about to see, this siman is going to be 8 different discussions that we'll deal with right now. Number 1, Rabbi Eliezer b'noi Shav Yossi Aglili Oimer. Aser libsaya. You're not allowed to make a compromise. A judge cannot prefer to end in a compromise, but rather, if they've come to Beis Din for a din, they have to make a din. It's not a time for a pshara. Says Rav Yisrael, strong words. When a judge facilitates a compromise, when again they're coming for a din Torah, then that is called a chayta. Continues Rav Yisrael, and anyone who blesses, praises a judge who gives a baitzea, a compromise, he is considered a blasphemer. And upon this says the pasuk in Tehillim, David HaMelech baitzea beirech needs Hashem. Says the pasuk, one who praises a compromiser is a nietz, is a blasphemy to Hashem. Ella rather, says the Gemara, Yikoiv hadin es ahar. The din, justice should prevail. It should literally pierce the mountains. Shenemar, quoting a pasuk in Devarim, ki hamishvat le'elakim because mishvat is Hashem's. V'chein Moshe Omer, and simply Moshe Rabbeinu would say, Yikov hadin es ahar. The din should pierce the mountains. Aval, 10 lines down. First line is Aval. Aaron, Oyev Shalom, Yeroidev Shalom. Aaron HaKohen loved and pursued peace. Who makes him Shalom in Adam Lechaveira, and he placed peace to people. Shenemar, Teiras Emes Isa Befiho. The Teiras of Emes was in their mouth. Va'avla, Lo Nimsa B'Svasav, and no iniquity, no avla was found in the lips. B'Shalom u'B'Mishar halach iti, concludes the pasuk in Malachi. He walked with me with peace and uprightness. V'Rabim Heishiv me'avoin, and turned away many from avoin. So Shita number 1, Rav Yisrael Glili, detesting and really speaking down upon a potential pshara in a case where there could be a din. Says the Gemara, Rav Eliezer Omer, another Shita. So again, Shita number 1 was whom? Rav Yossi, Rav Lazar ben Aish, Rav Yossi Glili. Shita number 2, about 15 lines down, the first line is Rav Eliezer. Rav Eliezer Omer Harisha Gazal. Says Rav Eliezer, if someone steals a sashal chitin v'tachna, grinds off and bakes v'fish ben chalak, separates chal. Keitzad mivarech, how can you make a brach on stolen goods? Many probably remember this from, well, either Baba Kama or in reality we have the Yesod all the way back in brachais. Ein zeh mivarech chel min ha'etz. To make a brach on stolen goods is a niyot, is blasphemy. V'al zeh ne'amar u'beitzei beirech nis Hashem. Shita number 2, what we do with this pasuk. Shita number 3, Rabbi Meir Omer comes along, Rabbi Meir, and he weighs in and he says, Lo nemar beitzei lekeneged Yehuda. What is beitzei utilized for? What is the pasuk referring to? Referring to Yehuda, shenemar, as the Torah says, Vayomer Yehuda l'achav ma'betza ki nari yisachenu. And again, the utmost siyata d'shmaya, the daf for Monday, we literally read this pasuk, this past Shabbos, ma'betza, says Yehuda. What gain is there? To cover, to kill our brother and cover his blood. If someone praises Yehuda, that is niyot v'alzen ne'amar. Says the pasuk, Shita number 3. Shita number 4, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer. Comes along Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, and he teaches us mitzvah lipsaya. It's a mitzvah, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, to create a compromise. And as you see the Gimel over here showing us that this is how we paskin. This is the reason why many, I'm sure, are aware that Lamaisa and Bati Dinim, we always favor compromises. Shnamar emes umishvat shalom, peace and truth are shalom, shiftu b'sharechem, are peace in your gates. V'aloi, but he continues and he explains, what does this mean? Peace, shalom, and mishpat can't coincide. Which way is it? Is it straight or is it a compromise? Is it a din or is it a compromise? You know what the pasuk means? What is a mishpat that contains within it this element of shalom? This refers to a compromise. Similarly, it says about David HaMelech, well, if there's mishvat, there's no stuck. Who's stuck in mishvat? But rather, he explains, says the Gemara, that is our Shita Rishua ben Karcha, and explains the Gemara, Asyan Litana Kama. This, we come back to the Tana Kama, Haviyomer Zebitua. Now, says the Gemara, after 4 different Shitas into Baitzia Berich Nitz Hashem, begins the Gemara about 12 lines before the medium-sized lines. Asan Litana Kama. Let's come back to the first Shita of Lazban of Yosei Glili, who says that Ayanim should not create a compromise. Says the Gemara, what does he do with this pasuk of David HaMelech HaMishpat Ustaka? Danis Adin Zikas HaChayev, v'Chayev is HaChayev, v'Rosh and is Chayev Ani Mammon. What happens if we made the one innocent and the one guilty? But we see that there's a poor person who's chayiv to pay money. You know what David HaMelech would do? He would pay from his own house. Zeh mishvat utztaka. That is a combination of mishvat, to correct halacha, utztaka, with the charity. Mishvat lazeh, it's the right halacha to the one who needs to get paid. Utztaka lazeh, but he gives tztaka to the other. Mishvat lazeh shechzol mammon l'maisi, gets back his money. Utztaka lazeh sheshilim lai mitaych beisai. Says the Gemara, we skip the parentheses, Kasha Leila Rabbi. Says the Gemara, 1 second, Rabbi had it shver. Hi l'chol amai laniyami ba'ilei. When the pasuk says it's tzedakah, what does it say? L'chol amai. What does that mean? Laniyami ba'ilei. The way that you're learning the Tanakam of the pasuk, the wordage is wrong. It shouldn't say l'chol beisai. It should say laniyim. So rather, Ella, Rabbi Omer, and Rabbi Omer, even if David did not actually pay from his own house, still, Zehu Mishal Ustaka. What? Mishal Lazeh, Ustaka Lazeh. Mishal Lazeh, Shech Salayim Mayna, in the first medium-sized line. Ustaka Lazeh, Shaitzik Zelim Midachas Yada. It's an element of tzedakah. When you paskin, even though the guy's now chayiv, but it's still an element of tzedakah. Why? Because he's able to pay back that which he took unlawfully. And we continue with the 5th Shita. Rabbi Shimon ben Asi Omer Shaim Shabal Levanech Ladinat Shaloi Tishma Divreihem. Before you hear their words, you already heard their sides. You're not sure which way to paskin. Then you're allowed to say to them, go and let's create a compromise. Once you hear their words, now you know which way you should be basking. Then you're not allowed to tell them, go and make a compromise. Poiter Mayim reaches Madain, Lifnei Yitgala. Poiter Mayim reaches Madain, Lifnei Yitgala, Hariv Nitoish. Says the Pasuk, when you release water, the Machlaikas at the beginning, before it's Yitgala, before it's revealed, then that is when. Meaning, once you know, then you're not allowed to create the compromise anymore. Explains the Gemara, Koidim Shenitgala on the first very wide line, Hariv Atiyachalinaich. Before it's revealed, then you're able to abandon it, meaning you can go and you can make a compromise of shar. At that point, once you know you're not able to anymore, L'noitchay. Before, no, I read that wrong. Let's go back. One more time, right before Reish Lakish. Koidim shenitzgal arev at yachal l'noitchay. Mishenitzgal arev iyat yachal l'noitchay. I think there's a type over here. We have the word yachal 2 times. It's only supposed to be there once. Reish Lakish Amar, says Reish Lakish. Shnayim Shabo Ladin, on the second very wide line. Echad Rach, Echad Gashe. One's gentle, one's harsh. That's Latishma Vrayim, for you hear their sides, and Mishish the Vrayim, or after you hear their sides. If you don't yet know the Psak Halacha, then you're allowed to say, I'm sorry, I am not getting involved. Why? Shema Nischayev Chazak. Maybe one who's strong will be Chayev, and him's a Chazak right fight. And the Chazak is going to harass the judge. So he could absolve himself from the case. But Mishatim Shadivrayim, once he hears their sides, and you know which way to paskin, then and then he's not able to say, I'm not getting involved. Why? The judge should not be afraid of anyone else. Moving on to the fifth where our lie, Minayin, the Talmud, Sheshav, the Rabbi, Raz, Chos, La'ani, V'chayv, La'ashir. Minayin Shlai Yishtek, if a Talmud is listening and watching, and he sees the Ma'isas, Chos for the Ani, he sees the Chayiv for the Ashir, he should not be quiet. Shenemar, Lo Segurum, Ne'ayesh, you cannot be quiet in front of a man. Rav Chananaymer, Lo Sechlis, Vrechab, and Ne'ayesh, no, do not withhold the words because of your teacher. Of course, it has to be said appropriately. But you should not sit by idly if you know something, even in front of the Rebbe. And witnesses should know, as me hein meidin. Whom are they testifying about? If they me hein meidin, in front of whom? And who is going to be the one that they're going to punish from? Shenemar Hashem. Hashem says the Apostle, showing us that the Edom have to be cognizant that, of course, the Kadosh Baruch Hu is one who is watching. And similarly, we had Yadim, Smein Danim, Lefnei Mein Danim, Miyat Lefrayim Mein Shenemar Lekim Nitzav Adas Kel. And similarly, it says by Yeshafat, Vayomer El Hashayftim. What does Yeshafat say? He says to the judges, Ru, see, on the 4 lines on the bottom, see what you're doing, because you're not judging for a man. Maybe the Dayan's going to say, Mali B'tarazeh, I don't need this. If I make a mistake, I'm going to get punished. Why am I getting involved? There shouldn't be a Dayan at all. Shenemar imachem bidvar mishpat, with you is justice. You only know what you see. So if you pass it based on what you see, you'll never be held at fault. Even the Dayan. Pick it up from here, 3 lines at the bottom. The Siyata Dishmaya.